All right, so I guess we got it recorded. I'll jump in and start for the sake of everyone's time and all the participants who chose to show up. Thank you so much for doing so. I will say this because I got a few on camera, a few off camera, that I fully intend for this to be interactive in some way. So if you have the ability to participate, please do, because I need to make the content relevant to what your business is and where you are on the planet Earth. And so the way that this presentation is created is to talk about a framework of generalities and create a baseline. However, that baseline has to match what you do in order for us to make this time meaningful. I've got an hour to cover a lot of information, and that information primarily exists in the realm of theme. And so with that, your participation becomes helpful to me as I navigate the dialogue. Is that good with everyone? So
Yep.
Dimitri and Jim, I can see your faces, so you guys become the head nodders and the disagreeers for the rest of the group because I can see you. All right. So I appreciate that. Good to see Larry Hart here. Thanks a lot for joining, Larry.
You bet,
So
Dr.
I'm going to go
Hibbs.
ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump in. Today's session is how to generate more revenue. And let me see if I can get this chat up as well, because some people, thank you, Darren, will write in the chat, and I want to see that in the chat. So either mechanism of communication hopefully will work well for me. Let me spread out the visual so I can see as many names and faces as possible. All right. So with this is going to be a little bit out of the ordinary at a level, because the first thing I have to do is that I got to create the baseline, then I got to break down some misconceptions, then I can go into strategy, technique, and proven realities around generating more business. So I am Dr. Baker. I'm the general practitioner of the Business Hospital in the United States. Our headquarters is in Cincinnati, Ohio, but we do have operations in Atlanta and Raleigh, North Carolina as well. We used to have an operations in the Philippines where Jemima is from, but we closed that location and moved our worker back here to the States. And then we have another office in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So just so you all know that we do have a global presence to provide assistance. So as we move forward, just members of my team, not important. When we navigate this, my business hospital looks at a business just like a medical doctor would look at the body. So even as I talk about how to generate more revenue, I'm still going to talk about it in the terms of health. So I need that not to be a barrier to you as I speak, is that I'm looking at healthy frameworks to help you understand and identify ways that you can raise or generate more revenue in your business, but all of it in a healthy manner. So I need that part to be the foundation of your understanding. So one thing is, though, even though my PhD is in business and leadership and my second PhD is in business and artificial intelligence, my background has primarily been in sales. And I was a #1 performer in 5 different industries of sales. And so the reason why I tell you that is because what I'm going to talk about transcends industries. Regardless of what you do for a living, who your target audience is, these are the baselines that you need in order to grow. So I've been #1 in men's fashion, mortgages, fundraising, pharma, and automotive, and obviously the business hospital that operates in 15 countries. And so I want you to notice that, if you're tailoring a men's suit, that's completely different than looking at mortgages and loans, which is completely different than nonprofit organization and raising funds. But there's certain consistencies that exist that if you master them and you understand your baselines, you literally can perfect your craft and then generate more. Good to see attorney Demetrius Evans on here. She shows up to a lot of events. So does Robert McCollar. All right, we continue to move forward. So the purpose is to introduce concepts of sales for increased sustainability and viability. Here's what's important. Businesses struggle regularly, regardless of the business that you have, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So when you think about generating more revenue, the component of that is so that you can remain viable. And we're going to look at the differences of those a little bit later. So economic misconceptions. I really want to jump in here. I submit that because I'm coming from a paradigm of the United States of America, I do know that the US is still an economic global leader. So if we use that as a premise, I'm going to use some of the misconceptions here that may or may not match one to one where you might be, but let's just use this as a general rule. So the median household income by race, Hispanic origin from 1967 to 2023. You look at Asians in the US, their household income is the most. Blacks are the least by half. This becomes really important because when we think about how much money should we make personally, our minds can get skewed because of social media, because of what your friend told you, because of what you Googled and it was misinformed. We need to have a sober mentality over how much money our company is generating, and more importantly, how much money you are individually taking home. Now, that doesn't mean that, you can't desire to have more, but what I find as a general practitioner is that people will put something in their mind and say, I should be making $1 million. But the role or the company that they have will never generate that number. So then they feel frustrated and discouraged, and then they quit. Or they start employing tactics that will not increase what they're making because those tactics are not good tactics. But you do it out of having a mentality that is misinformed. So I don't want you to be misinformed about what is real versus what isn't real based on even how much money should I make and should we generate. Next, when we look at income before taxes on self-employment by occupation. And so when we look at self-employment and the time and how much it's gone up and that's increased, but what you need to know is that that number is $68,030 is how much income before taxes the average self-employed person makes. This is based on tax returns. So once again, a misconception is I need to generate more revenue because I need more money. Why? Because I only made $75,000. Well, if you made 75 grand yourself, you made more than the average business owner. So now when you say more, we have to understand what more means because more is subjective. And so if your mind is sober and tempered based on what you should or shouldn't make, you'll know exactly what decisions to make as you try to grow your business. I submit to you that a lot of businesses fail and implode because they do it out of panic, desperation, greed, or a lack of understanding. And then they do things because they don't believe they're good enough right now, not knowing that they might be as good as they possibly can be. So I don't want anyone here to be in that boat. I would also say if anyone has a question or a thought or a challenge or anything to add, please stop me as I'm navigating through. Next here, the average small business revenue by number of employees. So here it is. If you have a company in the US and you have 1 to 4 employees, that average income is going to be about 350 grand. That becomes important because if you said, I need to make more revenue and you make $400,000 and you got 2 employees, you're above average and you would need to know that. As opposed to thinking that you're doing poorly because you made $400,000 and you say, well, now I got to make these new decisions or I got to invest in these ways that might become detrimental to you. So you need to know that. 86.3% of small businesses in the US earn less than $100,000 in annual revenue. That becomes important because once again, you're looking at the baseline. You need to know where you stand in comparison to the rest of your competition, regardless of industry. Any questions, thoughts, issues, confusions? We're good on that, right? Jim and Dimitri, I need you two to make sure that I'm good. Remember, you guys are my assistants in this. All right, so we're good. All right, so failure rate. We'll go through this pretty quickly, but these failure rates are really high. So when you look at year one, 22% of businesses are failing, another 19% after that. So as these businesses are failing, once you get to year 10, you've only got about 65% or 65% of the businesses are now gone. That becomes important to know that you are now navigating time frame with revenue minus expenses in order to say, am I sustainable or am I viable? And how do you keep up with the median or the average within your industry? But this is information that we kind of know and feel. But why do small businesses fail? We know cash flow. Not enough money is coming in, so the business stops. When we say lack of market need, that has a lot to do with your inability to articulate it. And we're going to talk about that when it comes to generating more money. But these cash flow problems is what we have to fix. How much revenue are we making, and are we making it regularly is what we need to deem. So let's look at marketing. And the reason why we're looking at marketing, and I don't know what any of you all think, I'd actually be very interested in knowing, but most people think marketing is selling. Are there any brave souls listening to this Globinar that can tell me the difference between marketing and selling? Anybody? I can't get one volunteer. That means I got to take some hostages.
I'm this is Darren. I'm headed out the door with my kids, but I think difference between marketing and selling is marketing is the message that you're sending out to the world. Selling is focused more. I think it's a little more specific to bringing in revenue, like you say, generating revenue, hard numbers, that you're bringing in. That's what I would.
So
That's what
Darren,
I would
thanks for
say.
that contribution. And Jim, you said marketing equals the introduction, and trust and sales is the next step. So the way that this should be viewed is that marketing is that you are pushing information to people. You're pushing it. Doesn't mean that they're receiving it, but you're pushing it. Selling is pulling. That's pull communication. So you're controlling what happens in that interaction. I submit to you that every business that I've ever seen, the overwhelming majority of them, they market and don't sell unless they've hired a professional salesperson and that person sells. But if they don't do that, everyone else is pushing, especially in our digital age. Because social media is prevalent, because YouTube is prevalent, because AI now exists, everyone believes that, well, I put messaging out there. I went to an event and I had a sign or I had a table. And you do all of these things where we push that messaging out there. If you think about movies, a movie will put a trailer out because they know you're interested in entertainment. But that doesn't mean that they can grab you into the movie theater to actually watch it. So as we look at marketing, and here's a definition: the marketing concept proposes an organization anticipate the needs and wants of potential consumers and satisfy them more effectively than its competitors. Can anyone tell me the most important word in this definition?
Well, Dr. Baker,
Yes, Barry.
I'm jumping in there. I have a note here of what Peter Drucker says it is. It's about
Okay.
knowing and understanding the customer so well the product or service fits him and sells itself.
Okay, so here's where there's a complication there, and I'm going to speak to that complication as soon as we say what is the most important word in this definition. So, Barry, what do you think the most important word
Let's
is?
see, the marketing concept proposes and anticipate the needs and wants. I would say the needs and wants of potential. So understanding your customer so well.
So, the number one word in here is anticipate.
Huh.
So, when you market, you're actually guessing and hypothesizing that you know, not because you engage with them. They didn't tell you that. You're doing that based on context clues and believing that that's the case. So
Mhm.
for an example, let's say that I frequented horror movies, but all of a sudden I get married and my wife hates them, and you keep pushing me horror films. Well, I might not go see a horror film now because I'd rather make my wife happy as opposed to going to see a horror film. I'm no longer in your market, although at one time I was, but you anticipated that I was. But you're not engaged with me to know that I have now changed it. You're still anticipating. So it cannot sell itself,
Yeah.
right? It only masquerades as if it could. And
Yeah.
so we do that with all of our products, is that we say, wouldn't this be great? Or everyone needs that. For an
Right.
example, Dimitri, who I just met today, thank you for doing the introduction, but you're in investments. It is plausible and reasonable that you think that everybody needs to be concerned with their investment. I submit to you that's not the case. Some people live just for today and could care less about an investment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's pretty good.
right? You've got a scenario where you might say, I want to leave a legacy. Some people could care less about a legacy or their children. I ain't leaving them nothing. I'm burning it all up. I'm spending every dime I get. Right? There are some people that behave that way, and you would market to them to say, they've got to be in my target audience. They're 50 years old, or they've been 20 years in an industry, and you're going to send them information about how much money you can make them in the market, or how you can diversify their portfolio, and they might not be listening. And that becomes problematic. So in marketing, you're anticipating. And so there's an importance there because I think it was Jim's point, is that there has to be an introduction, there has to be an awareness that takes place. So you do have to spend time doing that. Well, there's a marketing mix. What is that? They're called the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. So when you're marketing, depending on what product or service you have, what your price point is going to be, where you're going to push it out to, and then what is going to be that messaging, those 4 things, if those are done correctly, you can grab the attention of your target audience. Which is going to your point, Barry, when you talk about knowing your target audience, that would be the place. You want to know that if I have a certain product or service, I want to position that to where my tribe can see it. I don't want to push it where my tribe isn't.
And
Right. So if someone's marketing cupcakes, I don't want to see it because I ain't going to eat them.
and you know what? If the cupcakes get pushed on you, then you're going to resist it. And it's not even if you sell it, it's not going to go well.
Correct. Right. So it has
I've
to
had
be in the
that
right
experience.
place with the right promotion. But I might want cupcakes for my 11-year-old's birthday party.
Yeah.
Because even though I'm not going to eat them, I got 10 girls that are 11 years old that's only going to want sweets and cakes and everything else that I would never eat. So because of that, that promotion now would push me to Molly's Cupcakes, because now I'm in the right place for that. And so that's what marketing allows you to do, is to have enough education for me to rattle off Molly's Cupcakes. I don't know all the places that make cupcakes, but I know Molly's does. And so therefore, she's apt to get my business. Now, in that instance, will it sell itself? Yes, because I'm not a cupcake aficionado. I don't know what I should get or shouldn't get. I'm going to walk in and say, I got an 11-year-old girl who's got 10 other 11-year-olds that'll drive me nuts if I don't show up with cupcakes. And then that way they can give me what I'm looking for. I also submit to you that in sales, these 4 things are also similar, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. Conversion ratio by digital marketing. I'm not going to go nerd on you all. What I will tell you is that when you market, it doesn't convert at a high ratio. So when you are frustrated about how come you're not making more money because you put all this money into marketing and you've been pushing stuff out into the cyber waves, you have to temper your expectation. Once again, more is subjective. More is not an objective reality where it's one size fits all. It all is contextual. So if you decide that marketing is a part of your strategy, you have to know that these conversion ratios are real. And if you're spending dollars to convert, you're going to have to spend a lot of dollars. And the mistakes that I see is that, well, I want to increase my sales, so I went ahead and paid for SEO, but I'm not seeing my sales increase. That's because you only spent $500 a month, and $500 a month is only going to get you $30 in return, and you're going to be upset. So we need that part to be understood. So if you've got a budget for marketing, you got to know what you're going to get from it. My recommendation is that if you have a marketing budget, or if you want to put time, energy, and effort in the marketing, that you're doing it for awareness and education. You're not doing it to increase sales. You're just making sure that people know you exist, and that in the event that you go to sell them something, you have been heard before. Oh yeah, I heard of that before. Oh yeah, I've seen that before. Or where did that logo come from? Or someone told me about that. That's the purpose that you would market for. If you are marketing to generate more dollars, then you have to substantially invest in that space in order to see a decent return. Any questions or thoughts about this slide or the previous slides at all? Nope. We're good. All right, let's keep rolling. So next, let's go into sales.
Sorry, I have a question. If
Yes.
we investment for that process, and also we will not forget about the risk about marketing, because we can put money for some kind of marketing that's not be for a company good sometimes. Because we maybe the people, the company also can make the wrong decision, and that wrong decision can make the process like not increase for another way decrease if we cannot correct to way the choice the way for investment for marketing to marketing.
So as you're weighing out where should I put my investment, because that investment is a risk to that company. Once that money goes out the door, you're like, well, how do I get that money back? We already showed you how much the average company makes, and you would have to first say, am I an average company or not? So if I've got 4 employees and I make 400,000 US dollars, well, if I don't make 400,000, I'm below average. If I make 500,000, I'm above average. And if I've got a surplus based on my expenses where I can invest, that investment becomes a risk. It's an opportunity cost to say, well, what am I going to gain from this? Am I positioning myself better? And oftentimes business owners do not position themselves better. Therefore, they don't generate more revenue. They do it because they believe it's what they should do, and there's no hardcore facts behind the behavior. It's more like just shooting in the dark, and that's bad behavior. We don't do that in other components of our life, but we do it a lot in our businesses, and we should not do that. But thank you for that contribution, Dimitri. Thank you for that. So as we go into sales versus marketing, they fit together. In the event that you choose to market, it better match your sales outcomes. However, you can sell without marketing ever. And that's where the understanding of your business, one thing that business owners neglect is that they create a business because they have a passion or believe there's a need. What they don't see themselves as salespeople. If you have a business, you are now a salesperson. Congratulations, you just created yourself a sales job, because that is a big component of your day. So if once again, Dimitri's in the investments, you now sell investments now. That's what you do. If you are if you have a restaurant, you have to sell to convince people to come into that restaurant now. That's what you're doing. Thank you for that, Samuel. So as we move forward, it's the fundamental concept of commerce. This bullet point is saying that unless something is sold, there is no commerce. Now, this sounds pretty obvious. This is a rhetorical question. I am not asking anyone to answer this. But how many of you all go days without selling something? I know it's a bunch of you that a day goes by, you ain't sold a thing. That means there was no commerce. Even some people say, well, what if I'm on a slower sales cycle? Because there's bigger payouts on larger sales cycles, meaning that you might not get but 3 sales in a year. But that means that your process of selling should have taken place every day. Other businesses have microtransactions where they need people buying stuff every hour on the hour. But if you're not selling something, then you don't have business. They are synonymous. So what you have to think is when you wake up in the morning, who am I selling to? And is that process taking place now or not? It's the basic concept of commerce. I want your participation in this. Sales are activities related to selling or the number of goods or services sold in a period.
Hey,
what is the most important word here?
Hey, Dr. Big, one question. What if
Yeah.
you have long sales cycles like consulting, training and development, things like that, which takes a series of conversations to sell? How do you deal with that?
So you deal with that through, make sure that you remind, you don't have to remind me, I'm going to remember it, but I can't answer it yet, but I'm going to answer it cleanly in about a slide.
Okay, cool.
All right, I will not forget that.
Yeah, good.
All right, number one word in this sentence. Anybody? Brett, Terry, Robert, Wendy, somebody.
How about activities?
Who said activities? I missed it.
Larry.
Larry. Larry said activities. Jim said selling. Darren said number. Attorney Evans said,
Sold. Yeah.
okay. The most important word, which I feel like Larry's a cheater because I don't know how he knew it was activities, but it's activities. Good job, Larry.
Well, I think because you said it a minute ago, you got to be working toward that sale every day. If it's a long
Absolutely
sales
is.
cycle, you got to chip away at it every day. That's what you said just a minute ago.
So let me tell you why activities is the most important. It's because activities can be duplicated. You know what those activities are. You can name them. So when people say, how do I generate more money? The first question I'm going to ask are, what are your activities? And the moment you say, well, I've been posting, I've been going to events, and I'm going to say, none of those are the right activities. We've got to look at what are you doing? And that what has to be specified. And they look about the same from industry to industry, but there will be some differences and nuances, which is why when you ask me the question, Barry, about long sales cycles, we're going to talk about some of those activities. And so in that long sales cycle, there might be 7 activities you have to do in order to close that. You need to know that it's 7 every time, or it's 14 every time. For an example, when I was in the automotive industry, my sales consultants, I gave them a process called WHIP did. It was an acronym. So they had the welcome, the introduction, the presentation, on and on. At any given moment, I can say, where are you in the sales process? And they would say W, P, D, second D. So I knew what activities they were doing right now. And then there were other activities that we did to generate appointments. So I would know based on their call volume, how they're making their calls, who they're making their calls to determine what type of month they would have. And that type of month based on conversion rates would determine how much money we would make. Does that make sense or no? Did I do too much just then? But those activities help you understand what you should and should not do. So if you have not developed those activities, guess what? You'll never know how to legitimately increase your revenue. You will be guessing every single time. And the problem with guessing is that you're right sometimes. And that gives you the confidence to continue to do stupid stuff because you were right one time or twice. And you don't want to run your business that way, but that is how business owners typically do it. So to your question, Attorney Evans, is that are the activities different in every industry? Overall, they are about the same, but there's going to be some nuances that change from industry to industry. For an example, I don't know what it's like in Russia directly or what it's like in Singapore, but in the US, if you wanted to do business with our government, you would have to put in a request for a proposal. Well, there's certain activities that go along with that type of documentation that you would then use to solicit the government if you wanted a government contract. Well, that is different if you were selling gym shoes, because there's no proposal to write if you want to sell gym shoes or sneakers. However, you still have to cultivate your target. You have to then meet your target where they are. You have to use the 4 P's to determine what are you selling. Is it to the right people with the right promotion at the right price? So that remains static regardless who you're talking to and regardless of what industry that you're in. So then you build out those activities. Well, next, both seller and buyer engage in a process of negotiation to consummate the exchange of values. There's one word here more important than all the other words. What's that word?
How about negotiation?
All right, negotiation's a good guess. Anyone else?
Maybe consummate, right?
Potentially.
I'll answer for everybody. Or engage.
You getting closer. Jim said consummate. Samuel said engage. Miss Evans said engage. The word is process. And it's process because your activities turn into a process that you can then duplicate. No, Demetrius, don't write process after I said process. You don't get credit for being right on that. Can't help you. Right? So you got a scenario where that process, the alphabet, we learned our alphabet in a process. You learn how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a process. You learn how to tie your shoe in a process. Sales is an actual process. So you have to create a process for your company, your style, and all those that you're deploying on your behalf. And once you develop that process, you can go and say, every day I do this. And then from there, it's going to create a conversion ratio for you. And you're going to know, well, guess what? With this process, 52% of the time, I close people. I'll give you an example, my personal one. I close at 34%. What does that mean? Every time a potential patient takes a diagnosis from us, 34% of them are going to say yes. So if I know that, and that's historic over 9 years, if I know that to be true, if I want to generate more money, all I have to do is see more people. Do you guys agree? Or you disagree?
Agreed.
All right, so Thierry said yes. All right, Samuel said yes. So you got a scenario where if I know that I'm at 34% and I see 10 patients this month, well, I'm going to close 3.4 of them. But I'm like, I kind of need to make double that. Well, I need to go see 20 people now. Well, how do I see 20 people? Well, I better have activities in a process that is conducive to go see 20 more people. And if that process doesn't work for me to do that, at least I know what actions and activities I've done so that I can critique and revise them. So I've been doing this, but every time I do this, I can only see 10. How can I ever see 20? I got to change my process to get to 20. That's how you easily determine what to do in your business so that you can generate with the activities that you can master. So as we move forward, we want to look at prospect origin. Where do our prospects come from? So in the example I gave, if I needed to see 20 potential patients in a month as opposed to 10, well, where do they originate from? Where do I find them? Well, one is I have to understand who my consumer is versus the customer versus the ambassador. Can anyone help me understand tangibly the difference between consumers and customers? Anyone?
Well, it might be that the consumer is the one who uses your product. The customer is the one that brings you in and hires you. And I don't
Yep,
know.
that last hires you was so much better. Glad you gave us that. The consumer is a person that wants what you have. They just don't get it from you.
Mm-hmm.
Potential. Yeah.
Whereas the customer will. The customer actually is giving you their money for what you have.
Right. And
So,
with the,
you know, if I use a restaurant example and, you know, you've got a burger restaurant, someone is buying a burger, but who are they buying it from? Are they buying Baker's Burgers or are they buying McDonald's?
now
If the
the
burger is the same, why are they not buying Baker's Burgers? Why are they buying McDonald's? Because they're a consumer, they just aren't a customer.
right.
And now you have to be in front of them to say, okay, where are the consumers? And how do I transition them over to become customers? And there's activities for that. Then from there, well, what is this ambassador? What's the difference between an ambassador versus a consumer and a customer? Can anyone say?
Ambassador simply represents another word for influencer.
Okay, so that's a big component of who they are. But that ambassador might be a consumer. That ambassador might be a customer, or that ambassador might be none of them. But yes, Attorney Evans, they're going to tell people about you. So they become a benefit because they may earn you money directly, or they may not, but they might indirectly earn you more revenue. And you have to know how to use, leverage, and deploy ambassadors because that helps you with prospect origin. For a personal example, in my business hospital, I'm the general practitioner. I have other practitioners that work in the hospital with me. We have hospital wings, 15 of them. Those hospital wings are contracted companies that are contracted to us for service. So for an example, our legal wing has 3 law firms that are really large that are contracted to us. They are ambassadors for us. Why? Because when they have a legal client and they have a business problem that's not legal, they say you should go to the hospital. Now, that doesn't mean that those law firms are cutting the business hospital a check for treatment, but they are telling the world that they can't help, that they need to come into the hospital. And we need them. So if I ever need to generate more revenue, I can simply go to my legal wing and say, hey guys, I kind of need to see 10 more individuals. I need to see 20 patients this month. And what are they now going to do? Hey, if you got business problems, go see Dr. Baker. If you got business problems, go see Dr. Baker. And that's one way for me to have prospect origin. Does that personal example help you all? Do you all understand that logic? Yeah, no, maybe. If you hate it, tell me you hate it. Thumbs me down, frown at me, do something.
Yeah,
If you
makes
love it, let
sense.
me know that too. What's that, Larry?
Makes total sense.
All right, good news. So as we move from there, thank you, Attorney Evans. We have awareness and discovery. Right, Jim put on there networking 101. Darren, thank you. So awareness and discovery. Here's the thing. Most of us get stuck in awareness where we're just pushing the info. Hey, y'all, I do some stuff. Come check me out. We do the stuff. We got the stuff. That's where we kind of get stuck. Discovery is intimate. So if I go back to Barry's point earlier, knowing your audience, you have to be intimate with them. You have to get to a point where you ask them, do you want this? Is this valuable? Would you pay for this? Do you need this? Does this make you happy? Well, if you're not engaged with them, you can't discover that. Does that make sense? So you can't push information to them, because if you push information to them, when do they tell you that you're valuable? When do they tell you that what you have is what they need? They can't. So you can't discover. So in these instances, when we talk about activities, one of those activities is ensuring that you discover with them, which means you get intimate with them. Now that gets harder when you have microtransactions. If you're selling a widget or a commodity and you need to sell a bunch of them, it's hard to get intimate with them. But that's one reason why surveys go out. That's another reason why focus groups exist. That's another reason why collaborations exist, is because now you can have discovery that helps you say, this is where I need to plant my seed. This is the ground that's fertile that I need to develop. So next is the offering versus expectation. Consumer to customer, what's in it for me? Well, absolutely, Jim. You know, the what's in it for me is that somebody is paying money for something. You want them paying money for what you have. So therefore, you have to then articulate that in a way to where they receive it and say, you know what Jim has to offer is the very thing I want to give him my money for. So if we go to that offering versus expectation, a lot of times we're given a thing and the audience, it really isn't expecting what we're giving. They might be expecting more. They might be uncertain, all of that. One example from the automotive industry is features on a car. One thing that we would tell our sales consultants is that, hey, if a customer comes in and they're looking at a vehicle and they don't know how to use the buttons, they're going to think the car is stupid. If they don't understand what the engine does or what all the bells and whistles are, they're going to say, I don't like this car. But if you can explain to them that it makes it easier for them to transport their kid to soccer practice, then all of a sudden they like that car now. So your offering has to match the expectation, but the expectation isn't known unless you discover with them in an intimate way. And your activities have to lead to that. Next, we talked a little bit about conversion rate. So as we're looking at conversion rate, this is a rhetorical question. I don't want anyone answering this, but do you really know your conversion rates? I gave you mine. That was a real conversion rate that we have here at the business hospital. You need to know yours. In the automotive industry, we converted at 10%. In the pharmaceutical lane, I converted at 85%. So I haven't done pharmaceuticals in 20 years, but I remembered my conversion rate because that's how I became number one, is knowing when I walk in a doctor's office, am I talking to the right doctor? Can he prescribe the medication that I'm offering? And is he open to listening to the medication that I have to provide? And if I knew that ahead of time, when I walked in and told them that Zodol 7.5 cuts down on liver toxicity and extended therapy, well, why am I telling him that? Because I know that he only does treatment on extended therapy, and he doesn't want to blow the kidneys out of his patients. So if I've got a medication that is safer and more efficacious for his patient profile, that's better for him and his patients. He says yes, and he writes the medication. It's a very simple mathematical equation. I'm imploring you all to create that mathematical equation. Make sure that you know that with your business. I also submit, and I'm not saying this to be rude, but if you don't have your mathematical equation, you are failing yourself. We have to know that. Jim wrote in here, what of cost of acquisition and churn. That becomes important, because if you know what it takes to get you a customer, you're going to know you don't want to lose one, because it costs more to replace them than it is to keep them. But you should know that. What is it taking me to get somebody to say yes? So I know that not everyone in here is a math major, but at some level, we got to do the math. It will behoove you to keep it. So all leads are not equal. I find that a lot of business owners are chasing leads that don't convert at a high ratio, or if they do convert, they don't pay them at a maximum efficiency, or, they're kind of low-hanging fruit and easy to talk to, but they're not really economically sound. So let me put some color to that. I'm certain that a lot of you have spent time with someone that answered every phone call you had, every time you said, let's meet, they met, but they never bought anything. Or has that only been me that's ever did that? Am I the only person where that's happened?
Now, been there, of course.
Right? But they're so easy to talk to, and you can set that meeting that you spend time with them. But what happens is we spend time there, and we're not actually spending the time where we need to be. So now we have to rank our leads. I'll give another automotive example just because it's so easy. If someone put in a credit application, meaning that their credit is not that good, and they're trying to figure out if they can buy a vehicle, well, that's pretty easy to set that appointment, because that person is hoping you say yes, they can afford a car. But if a person puts in not an application, but a lead request saying that they've got their own financing, they've worked through their own bank, and that they want $5,000 off on a vehicle, well, you're like, that one's a little harder, because they have the ability to buy. However, the credit application may not be approved. So even though they're eager, they might not be approved, and the bank may charge more money to say yes to them. Whereas the other person, we know they're approved, and we know they can buy, and we can convert them over. Those leads are not the same. So as you're prospecting, you would have to make a determination. Do I spend time over here? Do I spend time over there? When you're trying to generate more revenue, you better know all your lead providers. Where am I finding my people? Who pays me the most? Who's the least amount of time? Who's going to send me referrals? Who can I leverage? Who can build up a bigger universe for my economics? That means you have to take the time, and this is one of the activities that match regardless of what industry you're in, is you have to take the time to rank your leads. For an example, I have 17 different methods of generating revenue for the business hospital. That is a real number. So I've told you that I know my conversion ratio, and I know how many different ways to increase my lead volume if I want to increase it. But out of all 17 ways, those are not all the same. Municipalities are way better for me than accelerators are. Why a municipality? Because they get federal dollars to do certain projects in a certain county. And they can give me 500 businesses at once, as opposed to an accelerator with a smaller budget that can only give me 1 or 2 businesses. So I spend time with municipalities. So that's 1 of 17 with a higher priority so that I can convert at a higher rate. That's an activity. Next, and I got to roll. The process for lead cultivation differs. So once again, my process for working with a government or municipality is different than working with an individual business owner. I need to know the cycle for one versus the cycle on the other. Next, compare the skill set to task. If you are not good at business development, you're not good at attempting to do sales, then you need to hire a person that is. If I don't have the money, then you might need to wait. Because if you can't sell, your business will not last. You'll be a part of that 82% that has cash flow problems, and then you'll be a part of that 67% that failed in the first 4 years. And we don't want that. So if your skill set isn't to cultivate and prospect and become intimate with your customer base or your consumer base, then you need to find someone that can. That is an investment you cannot forsake. So either you got to do it or someone else has to do it. Next, your unique selling proposition. Your USP is the advantage that you have. We better know our advantage. For an example, a lot of people say, well, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And if you're the smartest person in the room, get another room. Has anybody ever heard that statement before? Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Did I make that up and I was the only one that heard that? Well, here's the thing. My USP says I have to be the smartest person in the room. Why is that? Because I'm the business doctor and the business needs help. So if I don't have answers, I become worthless. So I know that. So I either have to have the answers or know where to get the answers really quickly. Because that's what people give me their money for, is to make sure that I know much more than them in all scenarios. You have to know that about yourself. Thank you, Darren. Is that you have to know that. You have to know what is your advantage. So do you properly articulate your advantage? A lot of my work with my patients has to do with reshaping their messaging, because you've got a scenario where they're not quite saying what they do really well. And it's hard to find out what the advantage is. Jim Cook, go to the smarter room. And absolutely. You still want to be learning, Jim, out of that other room. But in my case, I can't go into my patients and learn from them and they think that they're teaching me, because they're like, what I come to you for if I got all the answers? So I have to have the answers. But that may not be the case for some of your businesses. I know that Demetrius Evans is an attorney. If I know more about the law than she does, then the only reason I would be hiring her is for her to take the liability and to remove the liability away from me. But most people don't know the law, so she has to know it. And that becomes her USP. So we have to articulate that appropriately. Does the prospect understand it? You only know if they understand it if you're intimately engaged with them through discovery, which means that you have to communicate much better with that audience to convert them so you know that they heard you appropriately. And then, is that needed? I submit to you that your advantage is always needed, but sometimes it's just wanted. There's a lot that we do in the US. I can't speak for all the other countries, but the US is laced with wants and desires. We are the most frivolous country at buying stuff we don't need and ain't got to have. So we're just littered with wants. So whatever you're offering, we got to make sure that it's wanted. Then we got to close it. For an example, if somebody needs assistance in their business, I have to say, is this what you want and are you willing to pay for it? I can't assume that that's just the next step. I have to ask it, close it, and then push to the next step. This is the most critical. Even highly trained salespeople forget to do that step. I'm telling you, if you don't say, do you want what I have and will you give me your money to do it, it won't happen naturally. So you have to do that step. All right, sales clarity. We got to make sure we're selling as opposed to educating. Just telling someone or telling a group of people or pushing out correspondence, that's education. Sales is the whole component of, you said you needed, I have said thing. Do you want said thing from me for X amount of dollars? That's what sales does, and it happens in many different ways. Jemima, I got the time. I appreciate you. We got to collect our yeses. So the more somebody says, yes, you got what I want, I need that, and I'm willing to give you my money for that, you've got to collect those yeses. And when you do, you will make more money. A new to me, 3 letters, unique value proposition. I like it, Jim. Make sure that that value is open and that it's articulated between both of them. Thank you for that. Clear action steps. If someone doesn't know what to do next with you, they will not spend their money with you. You can't assume that they will, and never ever assume their level of understanding, education, intellect, none of it. You tell them like they're in the second grade. What we're going to do first is this. What we're going to do next is that. Do you agree? Yes, great. Give me your money so I can go do this other thing. You will generate more revenue by doing that. Close every step. Secrets of persuasion. My time is waning, but this is so valuable right now. These 6 things are what people are persuaded by. Write this down. If you didn't write down nothing else, you better write this down. 1 is consistency. If you are consistent, people will buy. That's why your process has to be the same. Your activities have to be the same. Your messaging has to be the same. And where you park it has to be the same. Because the more you see it, the more you're persuaded by it. I can't speak for the other countries, but people buy McDonald's here in the US because it's on every corner. It's inexpensive. You know exactly what you're going to get. We don't care about the health benefit. We just care that it's available and it's fast and I know what it will taste like. That consistency persuades people. So the more consistent you are at what you offer, the more they're going to be persuaded. Next is consensus. That's why people get reviews. That's why people look at references. That's why people look at how many likes you have or how many followers you have, because they're looking to see how many people validate what you have. So you have to make sure that everyone is telling you how awesome you are, or that you're doing business in wonderful places, or that you're accepted in a lot of places, because that persuades people to move forward and you will generate more revenue because of it. Next is your authority. Do not allow your customer base to tell you that you don't know what's going on. It's your job to tell the customers and the consumers what time it is. So in that instance, the more authority you have over something, the more they're persuaded to say, well, I should be doing what they say. That's why you will hear in commercials that 9 out of 10 doctors say a thing. They're like, well, heck, I need to believe them. They're the authority. Next, reciprocity. If you give something to someone unexpectedly and it's valuable to them, they are now persuaded to do everything else that you ask them. It has to be intentional and it has to be well timed. It has to be genuine as well. But reciprocity is a very strong persuasive factor. Next is liking. Liking is difficult, but it's the most powerful. If someone just flat out likes you, it gets done. Which is why we're polite, which is why we look professional, which is why we're on time, which is why we listen to them, which is why we answer questions. All of those things make people like you, which is why people tell jokes, which is why they smile, which is why you meet them for lunch or coffee. You do those things to get people to like you. But liking you will make you more money than anything. So if you're in the right audience or with the right audience, with the right messaging, they will like it, they will buy. Last is scarcity. This is the more difficult one because not all of us is offering something that is scarce. But if you're the only one to offer something, which is why it's important to have a differentiator. If you have a differentiator, whether it's a patent, whether you're the only one that can do something, whether you're doing something so uniquely different that they can only get it from you, that scarcity is a persuasive tool and it forces people to buy more. My time is short. I got so much more to say. Look at that. That's a whole bunch of stuff. But where I want to go into my final remarks is that here's your prescription. Differentiate marketing from sales. If you don't take anything from this Globinar, take the fact that you need to write out your activities, you need to create a process, and you need to do the math of your conversion. You do those 3 things, you'll know exactly how to increase your sales. Next, build out that daily process and stick to it. Don't do your daily process on Monday, do something else weird on Tuesday and Wednesday, then try to go back to your process on Thursday. Don't do that. Once you create your process, that process needs to be duplicated daily. Be realistic in your pursuit. That's why we spent time with the misconceptions from the beginning. If your business maxes out at $1 million and you're at 990, understand that you're doing about what you should be doing and maintain that. But if your ceiling of your business is 1.5 million and you're doing a $500,000, now you need to look at the process and the activities and everything else. Most times business owners don't know what their ceiling is. They need a financial strategist to help them understand that. I submit to you, work with one if you don't have one. Then next, track your measure and your efforts. You have to do your homework on your business. You've got to look back and say, okay, what did I do well? Then what else do I need to do? That's what we need to do. Any questions? And here's my info in the event that anybody wants to ask me something privately. This is how you reach me. I'm going to shut up now and see if there's any questions that we have for the
Yeah. Dr. Baker, what about the failures you sometimes have? You know, you work with a client, it just didn't go the way you intended. That, you know, that impacts your sales too, or your, you know, as a reference or referral. Anything you have to say?
Absolutely. You should be smart enough to know where your failures are going to come from ahead of time and then offer that as possible options of risk.
Yeah.
Right out the gate. So for an example, at the business hospital, I tell all our patients, just because you hire us don't mean you're going to make a dime more. So if you think that you're going to make more money, you just thought the wrong thing. You ain't hiring me for that. And that goes back to one of the slides that I had that said offering versus expectation. Typically, failures come because your expectations are mismanaged. So
You mean the
I can
client
offer,
expectations? Is that what you mean? Or what they expect from you?
yes, what they expect from you does it match? And when it doesn't match, that's the failure.
Yeah,
For an
that's
example,
good.
I can make a phone call every single time I want. Go back to one slide. Which one, Attorney Evans? This one? She told me to go back, and I don't know which one to go back to. But anyways, back to your point. I can control how many meetings I have, how many phone calls I make, how many emails I send. I can control the controllables. So as long as I control the controllables, that's not failure. Well, I hired you to do better in my business. No, you didn't. You hired me to make sure your business was healthy. So when you tell me you're going to do something, I'm going to say that's healthy or unhealthy and give you all the reasons why. The decisions are yours. The execution is yours. Well, what if I have a product and that product doesn't work well? Well, don't I have a return policy? Don't I have a refund policy? It's a man-made thing, and all man-made things break. So therefore, I better have a disclaimer somewhere. So therefore, it matches. Or, you know, you're in the US, right, Barry? So I'm sure you've flown before. If you fly Frontier versus flying American or flying United, there's certain disclaimers in Frontier tell you, if you got a problem, pay $25 more and we'll give you customer service. If you waive that, you don't even get customer service. So if a problem goes bad and you mad and you want to call somebody, they're going to say, did you pay the $25? If you say no, the expectation was outlined. We put it in the disclaimer.
Yep.
So you just have to manage them at the beginning.
Yeah, it's always at the beginning.
Always. You do it
80% of the
afterwards,
success.
you look incompetent or with full of excuses or, and all of that is bad for the brand. But if you do it ahead of time and say, here's all your risk, this is what we're dealing with. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's the important part.
Which is why we have to close every step. That's one of the steps you close.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Any other questions? Anybody? Joshua, you got anything? Samuel, anything? I want to make sure people are heard. Vanita, anybody before we have to go because I want to be respectful of your time.
Dr. Baker, as always, amazing. And Barry, thank you for stepping in and leading as you always do in such an amazing and professional way.
Yeah, sure thing.
What, Barry, just before we move on, could you just make some comments on what you heard today? Because you've seen these kinds of presentations before, and whenever Dr. Baker speaks, I just get blown away. You know, the knowledge you have, the way you present it, the intelligence that you bring to the table is just extraordinary. Barry, what do you think?
Well, for me, what I really appreciate, it all rings very true. And if I was to say bottom line, what salespeople don't do is they don't act. Without action, appropriate actions, discovering what works, what doesn't work, and refining on that, there's no surprise to not getting revenue. And most people think it's the pyramids or if I pray enough. I'm not knocking any of that, but yeah, I'll pray as much as I can if it produces results. But for the most part, if we're not in action, it's not going to happen. And I'm guilty of that myself.
Barry, you would be shocked, or maybe you would not be, and the rest of you all. When I work, we have something called task analysis where, and I get into your business pretty tough if I'm your business doctor, so you can't hide info from me. And when I break down people's day, I'll say, you made 14 minutes of sales calls today.
Yeah, I would say that's true.
How are we supposed to generate more money when you made 14 minutes of sales calls?
Yeah.
Like, that is an impossibility, but you've done so many other activities that you really felt productive.
Correct.
But didn't really
Activities
pass
versus
revenue.
producing results. Very, I see it a little different, but it's the exact same thing you're saying. Absolutely. And you know what? You get lucky once in a while. You know, the bird of paradise dumps on you and, oh, I got a $100,000 deal. And then you take a vacation for the rest of the year.
As opposed
I've
to
done
going
that
ahead
too.
and setting up the next one behind that one.
Oh, I did that for a whole year once. Really stupid.
Well, what happens is that it becomes the fool's gold. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many basketball players are here, but we play a lot of it. And my brother, if he makes a three-pointer, he'll just keep shooting them, and he's not a good three-point shooter, so he ruins the whole day with his bad shot selection. However, his brain says, I made that one, I can make other ones, and that's what happens in business. You do something that yields a dividend, and you think that's a good idea. This is not a plug. However, one of my many books that I've written, a textbook, is on how to make good business decisions. And we believe good decisions are based on the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not. Your outcome has nothing to do with if you made a good decision or not.
Yeah.
It's the inputs that you used at the time available to make the decision. The output is called the future. I have no idea what the future is. If I knew all that stuff, I promise you I charge all $1 million for treatment, because it
You'd
would
be
be worth that
retired
if
by
I could
now.
tell the future. Right. But because I can't, I charge substantially less, because I can only go by the inputs that are available, and that's available to everyone. Is that what are we doing habitually that lead us to the outcomes that we desire by percentage? Right. It's not fail proof, but more times than not, am I performing in a way that I expect? And if I'm not, how do I tweak it and revise it? But if your activities don't exist, you can't do it. Does that make good sense?
Totally.
Yeah, the other part that you mentioned, I think that's really cool, and then we'll need to close the room, is the difference between sales and education. And how often do we run into folks that it feels good to educate people? Hey, that, who doesn't like that, right? But to do that next step is so critical and critically important, and almost nobody does it. So thank you for spotlighting that and helping us with the actual, how do you do it? What are the actual things that you need to do that step? Incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, if there's any additional needs, you know how to be found. Doug, thank you so much. Larry, as always, appreciate everyone for your attention and participation. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, nice job.
Thank you. Good job, Dr. Baker.
Yeah, appreciate that.
All
Awesome.
right, everyone. Have a great one.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great day. Uzbekistan in 20 minutes, if you're interested.